Have you ever noticed that the deeper you think, the more alone you begin to feel? That the more insight you gain, the less others seem willing to hear you out? It's not your imagination. Society has long been uneasy around deep thinkers. Not because they're mistaken, but because they notice things others would rather ignore. History backs this up. From Newton to Socrates, from Tesla to Galileo, the brightest minds have often been mocked, dismissed, or silenced, not due to a lack of brilliance, but because their truths made people uneasy. Schopenhauer, known for his raw honesty as a philosopher, believed that intelligence was less a gift and more of a curse, one that isolates those who perceive the world with too much clarity. But why does this happen? Why is it that society often pushes away those who think outside the norm? The explanation lies deep within the mechanics of human psychology. Consider this. When you're next to someone who is physically powerful, you likely don't feel inferior. You admire their strength. When you cross paths with someone wealthy, you might feel envy, but not personally threatened. Yet when you're around someone with a sharper intellect, something different occurs. Psychologists refer to this as the mirror effect. A deep thinker doesn't just offer fresh perspectives. They unintentionally highlight the mental boundaries of those nearby, and people rarely take kindly to that. The very presence of someone who sees deeply into things can stir feelings of inadequacy, even if that person remains completely silent. But why does this happen? Why is it that intelligence, more than any other form of superiority, tends to stir such discomfort? To grasp this, we need to look at how our minds interpret different kinds of superiority. When someone is physically stronger, we might view them as a protector or a natural leader. If someone has more wealth, we may admire their achievements or feel motivated to pursue similar goals. Strength, beauty, wealth, these are external traits. We notice them, but they don't usually threaten our internal sense of who we are. Intelligence, however, plays by different rules. Unlike material success or physical prowess, intellect is closely linked to our identity. Our thoughts, our beliefs, our understanding of the world, these are the very things we use to define ourselves. So, when we encounter someone who thinks more deeply, someone who challenges the assumptions we've built our worldview on, it can feel like a personal threat to our very sense of self. Instead of admiring intelligence, many people subconsciously resist it, not because the deep thinker is arrogant or dismissive, but because their very presence forces others to confront their own limitations. This is why, throughout history, deep thinkers have been pushed to the fringes of society. Their insights don't just challenge ideas, they challenge egos. And human beings, by nature, will do almost anything to protect their ego from discomfort. Take a moment to think back on your own experiences. Have you ever brought up a deep or complex idea during a casual conversation, only to be met with silence or confused looks? Have you noticed how quickly people change the subject when the talk starts to go beneath the surface? This isn't just random. It's a form of psychological defense. When someone encounters a deep thinker, their mind instinctively shifts into self-protection. Curiosity is replaced by resistance. Engagement turns into dismissal. And this is exactly why intellectuals, philosophers, and visionaries so often find themselves on the outside. Not because they seek isolation, but because the world gradually shuts them out. Interestingly, research has shown that in social settings, confidence is often valued more highly than intelligence. People tend to gravitate toward those who express certainty, even if their ideas lack depth. This explains why charismatic yet simplistic thinkers often gain more traction than those who speak with complexity and nuance. Throughout history, we've seen populist leaders, motivational speakers, and viral influencers rise by feeding people comforting narratives, rather than encouraging them to think critically. At the same time, individuals who challenge commonly held beliefs frequently struggle to reach a wider audience. This is the paradox of intelligence. The more someone seeks truth, the more they become disconnected from the majority. The mirror effect does not just reflect society's limitations. It highlights why society resists change in the first place. But the question remains, if intelligence is so threatening, is there scientific proof that people actually fear it? Modern neuroscience backs this up. Studies show that when people feel intellectually inferior, their brain's amygdala, the region responsible for fear and threat detection, becomes highly active. In simple terms, deep thinking is not just intimidating. It triggers a primal survival response, similar to what we feel when facing danger. But why does intelligence trigger the same fear centers in the brain as a physical threat? The explanation lies in our evolutionary history. For the vast majority of human existence, survival wasn't about outsmarting everyone, it was about belonging. Our ancestors lived in tight-knit tribes, where fitting in was crucial to staying alive. Social cohesion ensured protection, while rejection could mean isolation and with it, danger or even death. This is why our brains are hardwired to prioritize social acceptance over intellectual exploration. When a highly intelligent person steps into a social environment, they often disrupt the unspoken balance of the group without even trying. Their very presence questions established beliefs, social customs, and group dynamics. This can activate the brain's defensive instincts, as though it's encountering a threat, not simply a more thoughtful mind. That's why many deep thinkers end up feeling isolated, not due to a lack of social ability, but because their intellect sets them apart in a world that favors conformity over individuality. A 2021 study at Stanford University uncovered something even more shocking. The projection of deep thinkers is context-dependent. When people interact with an intellectual one-on-one, they feel less threatened. But in group settings, the threat response spikes dramatically. Why? Because social status becomes more important in groups. People don't just react to intelligence itself, they react to how others perceive them in comparison. If someone feels outshined by a deep thinker, they instinctively try to undermine or exclude them to protect their social standing. This explains why deep thinkers often find genuine conversations in private settings but struggle to engage in large social environments. Psychologists have identified several cognitive biases that help explain why intelligence is so often met with resistance. Take the Dunning-Kruger effect, for instance. Individuals with limited ability tend to overestimate their knowledge, while those who are genuinely intelligent often question their own understanding. This imbalance creates tension. People who know little may believe they know more than they do, making them quick to dismiss those with deeper insights. Then there's the status quo bias, the brain's natural tendency to favor familiar ideas over complex or unfamiliar truths. Since intelligence often brings disruptive concepts, it naturally makes people uneasy. And finally, the backfire effect. When someone is presented with evidence that challenges their beliefs, they don't necessarily reconsider. Instead, they often cling even more tightly to their original views. Deep thinkers frequently encounter this resistance when they share thought-provoking or uncomfortable ideas. In today's digital era, social media has only intensified the rejection of intelligence. Algorithms are designed to reward engagement, not depth. So emotionally charged, provocative content spreads far more quickly than carefully reasoned arguments. Just look at the most viral posts. They're often simplistic, catchy, and frequently misleading. Nuanced conversations rarely compete. The more intellectually inclined someone is, the more difficult it becomes to distill complex ideas into quick, shareable snippets. As a result, society continues to lean toward entertainment rather than insight, making it even harder for deep thinkers to gain broad recognition. So what does this mean for deep thinkers? The rejection of intelligence isn't just social. It's biological, psychological, and cultural. It is built into human nature, reinforced by group dynamics, and magnified by modern technology. This doesn't mean deep thinkers should stop sharing their ideas, but it does mean that they need to understand the forces working against them. But if intelligence is so often rejected, what exactly does society embrace? The answer is comfort a world where familiarity is valued more than truth. Arthur Schopenhauer, one of history's most brutally honest philosophers, didn't see intelligence as a blessing, but as a burden. While many thinkers viewed intellect as a path to achievement, Schopenhauer believed that the more intelligent a person is, the harder it becomes for them to relate to others. But why is that? What makes intelligence feel like a weight rather than a gift? At the heart of Schopenhauer's philosophy is an idea he called the will, a blind, irrational force that drives all human actions. According to Schopenhauer, most people are driven by what he called the will to live, a force that pushes them to seek comfort, pleasure, and survival above everything else. But highly intelligent individuals tend to function on a different level. Rather than simply obeying instinct, they develop what he termed the will to truth, a relentless drive to uncover reality, even when it brings discomfort. While the average person avoids painful truths in favor of comfort, deep thinkers pursue truth, even when it isolates them or causes suffering. This creates a profound disconnect, where most people find meaning in relationships, routine pleasures, and entertainment, deep thinkers often feel a sense of disillusionment, viewing those things as mere diversions from deeper, more existential concerns. Schopenhauer believed that the deeper someone understands human nature, the more difficult it becomes for them to connect with others. They see through the illusions, the falsehoods, and the subtle deceptions that underpin most social exchanges. Much of everyday interaction is built on small talk, status signaling, and polite dishonesty. Things that those who value truth over appearances find hard to engage in. While society leans toward simplicity and surface-level chatter, deep thinkers yearn for substance. This contrast makes ordinary conversations feel empty, leaving them bored or emotionally detached. They see through the endless cycle of human wanting. Schopenhauer viewed desire and ambition as illusions. Most people chase wealth, influence, and romantic connection without questioning why. In contrast, deep thinkers often examine the meaning behind these pursuits, which can make them seem distant or uninterested in the very things that drive most of society. This is why highly intelligent people often feel alienated, misunderstood, or even quietly resented. Their presence alone can force others to face truths they'd rather ignore, and most would prefer to look away. Schopenhauer likened intelligence to a heightened state of awareness, a so-called gift that often feels more like a burden. He once wrote, "A high degree of intellect tends to make a man unsocial." His logic was clear. The more you perceive, the harder it becomes to overlook. The deeper your understanding of the world's imperfections, the more difficult it is to find joy in it. The more you think, the more isolated you become. For Schopenhauer, there was a stark inverse relationship between happiness and intelligence. In his view, true happiness belonged not to the wise, but to the blissfully unaware. This is why deep thinkers throughout history, Pascal, Kafka, have often struggled with depression, existential crises, and social isolation. Schopenhauer did not just diagnose the problem, he also offered solutions. He believed that while intelligence leads to loneliness, there are ways for deep thinkers to cope with their isolation. Embrace solitude. Schopenhauer saw solitude not as a punishment, but as a privilege. He believed that deep thinkers should use their alone time for intellectual and creative pursuits rather than seeking validation from society. Find like-minded individuals. Instead of trying to fit into mainstream society, Schopenhauer advised intelligent people to seek out those who think like them, whether through books, philosophy, or exclusive intellectual circles. Engage with the world thoughtfully. Schopenhauer cautioned against openly sharing profound truths with those unprepared to receive them. Instead, he advised thinkers to observe society, recognize its patterns, and speak with intention. His insights offer guidance to modern deep thinkers who feel the sting of social alienation. While intelligence may bring solitude, it also offers clarity, freedom, and a richer understanding of existence. Schopenhauer viewed intelligence as a double-edged sword, capable of both illuminating truth and inflicting pain. It sharpens perception, but often at the cost of connection with those who find comfort in illusion. In the end, Schopenhauer's philosophy confirms what we already suspect. Society doesn't fear intelligence itself. It fears what intelligence reveals. Deep thinkers aren't rejected because they are wrong. They are rejected because they are right too soon. So if you've ever felt alone in your thoughts, know this: you are not broken. You are simply seeing the world for what it really is. But does this mean deep thinkers are doomed to isolation? Or are there ways to navigate society while preserving intellectual depth? The reality is that society isn't designed to welcome deep thinkers. It's designed to preserve stability. For most, comfort is more desirable than truth. That's why social spaces are filled with surface-level conversations, oversimplified ideas, and recycled content. But why is comfort consistently chosen over intellectual depth? Why does society push back against change, even when it promises progress? The answer lies both in the way human psychology is hardwired and in the influence of institutions that shape our mindset from an early age. At its foundation, the human mind is wired to seek certainty and predictability. Evolution has conditioned us to steer clear of mental discomfort, a concept psychologists refer to as cognitive ease. This principle suggests that the brain naturally favors simple, familiar information because it demands less cognitive effort. When confronted with ideas that are complex, unfamiliar, or layered, the brain sees them as mentally taxing and possibly threatening. System justification theory sheds light on why people defend existing systems, even when those systems work against them. Rather than challenge authority or outdated norms, many choose to rationalize them because the prospect of change introduces too much uncertainty. Then there's groupthink, the tendency to align with popular opinion, to avoid social isolation. It's this instinct that causes society to reject intellectual dissent, even when that dissent is grounded in truth. Our deep-seated preference for comfort over complexity explains why intellectuals, philosophers, and scientists rarely achieve broad acclaim, particularly while they're alive. Just look at today's online landscape. Who dominates social media? Not the scholars, but the creators who can compress complicated topics into quick, feel-good sound bites. Substantive conversations rarely break through because depth demands time, while viral posts are immediate, emotional, and effortless to consume. Algorithms chase engagement, and nothing hooks audiences faster than controversy, outrage, or humor, forces that routinely edge out calm, rational discourse. The result is a web of echo chambers, where people encounter only the ideas that confirm what they already believe, leaving them closed off to fresh viewpoints. In such a setting, thinkers who question the prevailing narrative are often overlooked, misinterpreted, or outright attacked. The dismissal of deep thinking isn't limited to the digital world. It starts within the very institutions that shape how we think, schools and workplaces. While education systems claim to champion intelligence, what they truly reward is compliance. Students who excel at memorizing and repeating accepted information are praised, while those who question or challenge authority are often labeled as problematic. In the professional world, intelligence and innovation aren't always prioritized. Instead, success often goes to those who blend in, uphold company culture, and preserve the existing hierarchy. The same dynamic plays out in politics. Leaders who speak hard truths grounded in reason frequently lose out to those who cater to what people want to hear. This pattern helps explain why so many of history's greatest intellectuals were outcasts in their own time. Their ideas were seen not as visionary, but as threatening to the status quo. Society often claims to admire intelligence, innovation, and critical thinking. But in truth, it only celebrates these traits once they become safe and socially acceptable. Take a look at history. Galileo was condemned and imprisoned for his groundbreaking discoveries. Yet today, he's hailed as a pioneer of science. Van Gogh spent his life in poverty, unrecognized, while his art now sells for millions. Nikola Tesla transformed the world of energy, yet he lived and died largely unnoticed. The pattern is clear. Society doesn't welcome intelligence when it disrupts the norm. It only honors it in retrospect, after the threat has passed. So, what can deep thinkers do when acceptance feels out of reach? If you've ever felt alienated for thinking deeply, you're far from alone. Many of history's greatest minds weren't recognized in their own time. They were dismissed, attacked, or forgotten. Their thoughts were considered threatening, unsettling, or simply too complex for the world to grasp. But they all shared one defining trait. They were thinking beyond their era, and because of that, they often paid a price for their insight. Socrates, often regarded as the father of Western philosophy, dedicated his life to questioning accepted truths. He urged people to think critically, to scrutinize their own beliefs, and to prioritize reason over inherited traditions. Yet, instead of being honored for his intellect, he was put on trial, accused of corrupting the youth and disrespecting the gods. His true offense, inspiring individuals to think independently, offered a chance to escape. Socrates instead chose to drink poison, refusing to compromise his ideals. His final words still echo through time. The unexamined life is not worth living. His death made one thing unmistakably clear. Society deeply fears those who confront its foundational beliefs. Galileo's only offense was uncovering the truth. By demonstrating that the earth orbits the sun, he directly challenged centuries of religious doctrine. The church, whose authority rested on controlling knowledge, labeled him a heretic. Under the threat of torture, he was forced to publicly renounce his own findings. Though today he is celebrated as one of the greatest scientists in history, in his own time, he lived under house arrest, and his work remained censored for nearly 100 years. Galileo's story serves as a powerful reminder. Even the clearest truths will be suppressed when they endanger those in power. Nietzsche's work was considered too radical, too unsettling. He argued that traditional morality was flawed, that society was built on comforting lies, and that true strength came from creating one's own values. At the time, these ideas were too much for people to handle. He was dismissed as insane, his works ignored or misunderstood. Yet today, Nietzsche's philosophy influences psychology, literature, and existentialism. His ideas on power, will, and morality now shape modern philosophy, proving that society often rejects deep thinkers in the present only to embrace them in the future. Tesla was a true visionary. He imagined a world powered by free energy, wireless electricity, and groundbreaking technologies that could have transformed humanity. But those in positions of power saw his vision as a threat. Industrial giants like Thomas Edison and J.P. Morgan, who profited immensely from selling electricity, made sure Tesla's concept of free, limitless energy was never realized. Despite his brilliance, Tesla died alone, penniless, in a modest hotel, room largely forgotten, while others amassed wealth from the very ideas he pioneered. His story perfectly illustrates how society often elevates marketers and businessmen above genuine innovators. Alan Turing played a pivotal role in ending World War II through his groundbreaking work in cryptography. His ability to break enemy code saved countless lives, and his theories laid the groundwork for modern computing and artificial intelligence. Yet instead of being celebrated, he was condemned for his private life. In 1952, he was subjected to chemical castration simply for being gay, a punishment that ultimately led to his tragic suicide at the age of 41. While Turing is now remembered as a hero during his lifetime, society cast him aside despite his extraordinary contributions. While most historical deep thinkers were men, Hypatia of Alexandria was a rare exception. A philosopher, mathematician, and astronomer who challenged the male-dominated intellectual world of ancient Rome. She taught scientific reasoning and rational thought, which put her at odds with the religious authorities. In the year 415 AD, a mob of religious extremists brutally murdered her, seeing her as a threat to their power. Her story highlights a crucial pattern in history. Intellectual progress is often met with violent resistance. Each of these thinkers shared the same fate. They introduced ideas that were too advanced for their time, and they were rejected, ridiculed, or punished while they were alive. Their ideas later became the foundation of human progress. Society doesn't fear intelligence itself. It fears what intelligence represents: change. This brings up a crucial question. If history shows that society often resists deep thinkers, what should you do if you are one? Does it mean you're destined for loneliness? Absolutely not. It simply means you must learn to move through the world with intention. Not every environment or person is suited for deep dialogue. Reserve your most meaningful insights for those who genuinely value them. You don't need the approval of millions, just connection with the few who truly understand. Seek out those who think like you, whether in books, online communities, or intellectual circles. The greatest thinkers in history found ways to make deep ideas accessible. Einstein said, "If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough." Learn to communicate your depth without overwhelming others. Schopenhauer once said, "Talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see." Deep thinkers see the world differently, and that will always make some people uncomfortable. But that does not mean you should stop thinking deeply. Society needs deep thinkers, it just doesn't always know how to embrace them. So if you've ever felt like your thoughts set you apart, know this: you're not alone. While society may resist deep thinkers, it's those very minds that drive human progress. If this message spoke to you, drop your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever been dismissed or misunderstood for thinking deeply? Let's open up that conversation. And if you're interested in diving deeper into the wisdom of history's greatest minds, make sure to subscribe. This journey is only beginning.